Matt Rose, who is the CXO of Tech Rage IT in Winter Springs, joins us live now via Zoom. And Matt, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. AI in 2025, still a work in progress, it seems.
Yeah, it really is. It's come a long way. Even in the few years it's been kind of mainstream, and it's going to continue to get better. But it certainly still has plenty of issues, as warranted by the what you're referencing now.
There are a lot of uses, though, for it. We're seeing it used in so many different settings now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the uses are potentially endless. It's just a matter of if you're utilizing it properly. And that's the thing. It's really great and easy to just kind of use it almost like a replacement for Google and ask it a basic question. But when you get into something complicated, you get into a court case, or really writing anything that has to be accurate, you have to be really careful with what you're getting from it.
And so, what are some of those limitations of it? When we talk about the false information that it can sometimes spit out, what are some of the limitations that we see in it now?
So the biggest limitations, and we were talking briefly, it's called hallucinations. That's if you look up AI hallucinations, it's a pretty common term now, and it does that because these LLMs are pulling from various sources, the internet, articles, Wikipedia, even sometimes, but then they're also pulling from data it's learned from other people. So when you use ChatGPT, and if you're sharing your data with them, which by default you are whatever you search for and whatever it creates for you, it's utilizing that to train its data. So if it's getting bad data, it's trained on bad data, it's going to give you misinformation, or it's weird. It wants to actually be helpful. So a lot of times it just wants to give you an answer, even if you call it out and say, I don't think that's accurate, it'll actually apologize to you and say, I'm sorry, you're right, it was wrong. And it'll actually try to correct itself. So
it's a lot more willing to admit mistakes than many humans are.
That's true. And I just heard the other day, someone told a story about how when it was wrong on some sort of even a financial thing, they called it out and it said, I'm sorry, I was trying to get your answer quickly. And it's kind of funny that I can actually give you an answer that's somewhat of an excuse you'd hear from anyone else.
Unfortunately, that's not an excuse that we can use in the journalism business. But so how often do we see these hallucinations?
Pretty often, unfortunately. The whole idea, to responsibly use AI, first and foremost, one thing I have to mention, being in the security world, is you got to be careful what you're throwing in there. If you're putting in personal information, financial information, that's usually not a good idea. There's ways to do it securely, but be careful what you're giving. But then always be proofreading what you're getting from it. And a lot of it also, so you're going to get information a lot. So always read it, but then you also want to make sure that your prompts. So there's a term called prompt engineering that's becoming a larger thing because it's actually kind of turning into a career. The better your prompt, the better the data you get out. So how you ask the question is actually going to help you get more proper information from the system.
What are some good things to keep in mind as you are kind of writing those prompts, or any kind of general rules of thumb?
Yeah, so it's funny, I'm actually here today at a conference where the AI is normally talked about, which is everywhere. Some of the things you can do is you can always tell AI to act as something. Like if you say act as whatever the job is they should be doing, you have to give it a clear instruction, what your audience is, what you're trying to do. And then the thing that I've started doing a lot in the last few weeks myself anyway is ask AI to give you a prompt. Like tell it what you want to do and say, does this sound good? How would you ask it? And it'll actually give you critique on what you're trying to do to try to get you a better answer.
That's really interesting, actually. I wouldn't have thought to do that. So we type up the prompt, we put in what we wanted to find out, it gives us our information back. What do we as users need to then kind of consider with what it tells us and how to use that?
So always proofread it. Again, you shouldn't be taking anything, even if it's an email, even if you say, hey, write this email, make it sound better, make it sound more professional, always proofread it because it may make a mistake. But you want to proofread it. You may want to read it and say, I'd like it to be a little more serious, a little more fun, whatever the term might be. And then you may just say to it, and you also want to look at some of the language it's using. A lot of people use these for LinkedIn posts and things like that. And LinkedIn, it loves emojis and the little rocket ships and stuff like that. So there's certain words that if you don't want someone to know you're doing AI, you probably should proofread a little bit, but always proofread, whether it's for wrong things or whether it's to sound more like you. And you can actually give it examples of your writing or what you're doing and to tell it to try to write in your style or do something in your style. So you can always do that as well.
But as you also touched on, be careful about some of the information that you do put into it.
Always assume that by default, anything you put in there will become public domain. That's kind of the best way to put it. So if it's that you want it to help you figure out a spreadsheet where you've taken customer or private data out of it, great. Like where it's just numbers that you want it to help you do some math, that seems fine. But if you're going to put in a P&L, you're going to put in your, employee, obviously your protected employee information, please don't do that. Or at least talk to a professional, someone in security. There are ways to do it better, but you shouldn't just do that by default, especially with the generic ChatGPT out there.
Because it's also using what we put into it to learn more and to continue to develop. No.
It is, exactly. And everything you put in there will help it train in order to get other responses. And don't forget, there's also things like deepfakes. Like the more you put in there, the more, if you are a public figure in some standpoint, it can actually utilize it to do bad things.
Phew. I think that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, Matt. So
we'll come back for that one.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Matt Rose, CXO of TechRage IT. We appreciate you joining us here on Florida Live this afternoon.